Hello everyone and welcome back to the Magnus Carlsen Invitational. This is game 4 of the match for the third place Wesley versus Magnus Carlsen, and it's quite a short one, so again, without further ado, let's check it out. Wesley has the white pieces and he opens with e4. We have e5 by Magnus, knight to f3, we have knight to c6 and bishop to c4. Sorry about that. We have bishop to c5 by Magnus, and Wesley, of course, goes for the Evans gambit. He plays b4. Yeah, no, he doesn't. He plays c3. Of course, he goes for the main line of the Giuoco Piano. We have knight to f6 by Magnus, and now d3. So playing very solid. We have d6 by Magnus and knight b to d2 now. So this has all been seen before, nothing out of the ordinary. We have castles and now h3, not allowing bishop to g4. We have a6 by black and now bishop back to b3. We have bishop to e6. Magnus now offers a trade of dark square bishops, and this is only to make sure he gets a very strong center. If Wesley captures, then he gets a semi-open f-file for the rook. He gets support for pushing d5 at some point, but Wesley doesn't allow this. He pushes bishop to c2, and now what does Magnus do? Well, what do you do when your opponent allows it? You play d5. So this is exactly what he does. We have d5. Makes sense, as you don't want to have that backward pawn, and also white's king is still in the center of the board. You want to attack it. Wesley goes knight to g5 here, and it's interesting that Wesley already had this position in the Tata Steel tournament last year against Viswanathan Anand, and Wesley was able to win that game, but in that game Vish continued with d captures on e4, but here Magnus just retreats with the bishop. He plays bishop to c8, and this is now a new move, so already as of move 10 we have a completely new game, and it seems that Magnus was able to surprise Wesley by finding a move in a very top tier game that Wesley won last year against Anand. So let's see how Wesley deals with this. E captures on d5, we have queen captures on d5, and now Wesley castles. It definitely makes sense. The black pieces are closer and closer to the white king, and also the g2 pawn is hanging. So here white castles and bishop to f5 now. Magnus going for some very rapid development here. Knight d to e4, and now comes bishop back to e7. Magnus doesn't want to allow this trade knight for bishop, so bishop to e7, preserving both of the bishops, and queen to f3 now. Now with a nice trick, if knight captures on f6 with check, then Wesley picks up Carlsen's queen here on d5. So queen back to d7, and now b4. Grabbing more space here on the queen side, we have rook 8 to d8 by Magnus, and now rook to d1. Rook to d1, now the bishop can also move, the d3 pawn is nicely defended, and here comes, okay, although instead of rook to d1, you could have gone for knight captures on f6, seems to be a bit of a safer move, and after bishop captures, knight to e4, but Wesley decided to go for rook to d1 instead, and now Magnus plays the very, very interesting knight to d5. Now, what do you play here? The c3 pawn is hanging, and you don't want to give it up for nothing. So here, Wesley pushes d4. Now the queen defends the c3 pawn, and it's a very tricky position. For example, if you go for e captures on d4, then we get this amazing knight to c5 with an attack on the queen. And here Magnus would have the opportunity to actually sacrifice the queen with bishop captures on c2. For example, knight captures, rook captures, and now you have this very, very unpleasant choice of giving up the exchange or allowing d captures on c3, and this will be just a monster pawn on c3. So here best would be to just capture that, knight captures, attacking the queen, c captures, and now bishop captures on b4. We would get this position where Magnus would have two rooks, a bishop pair and the knight against the queen, rook, knight, and bishop, and black would definitely have the compensation here, but maybe it's not all that much. So instead of going for this, Magnus just retreats. We have bishop back to g6, and now Wesley trades on e5. We have d captures on e5, knight captures on e5, and now queen to g3. Putting pressure on that knight on e5. We have knight to c4, now getting that knight even closer. Could be a bit dangerous because the queen is still occupying this d7 square, but doesn't appear to be a problem. Wesley starts pushing the h-pawn. Now the knight is defended. This knight can now move, but now queen to c6. Magnus unpins, and now this knight can move. So what do you play here? Here it's very hard to find a move for Wesley. There are a couple of moves like rook to e1, getting the rook away from the d file, bishop to b3 maybe, but Wesley played rook to d4, and this move simply will not do. But it's not all that easy to exploit. Magnus took his time definitely, so I suggest you do as well. Feel free to pause the video and find the winning idea for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting knight captures on b4. And yes, for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, that's exactly what you have to do here. Knight captures on b4, and this just wins on the spot. The problem is everything is hanging here. The rook is hanging. If you capture, of course, the knight, then black just captures the rook. There's, of course, no, that's not the way to go. If you capture something else, if you capture on c4, you could give up the exchange. It doesn't really help you. Just queen captures on c4. And once you capture the knight, the queen also picks up the bishop on c2. So that also doesn't help. So here, instead, after rook to d4, after this knight captures on b4, Wesley decided to go for the only thing left, and that's rook captures on d8, threatening rook captures on f8 with check. But now Magnus plays knight captures on c2, and now Wesley's a1 rook is hanging. But still, rook captures on f8 comes with check, bishop captures on f8, and now rook to b1. Wesley gets the rook out of harm's way, but you know, that doesn't really work. Bishop captures on e4, Magnus wins another piece, knight captures, queen captures, and it was in this position on move 25 that Magnus Carlsen wins the game, or rather Wesley so resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So two swift victories for Magnus in the semifinal, in the match for the third place, and we'll see what happens tomorrow if he can take it all the way. So here you resign because you're just down material. Black has two pieces for a rook, and there's just not all that much you can do. Once the knight moves, the rook will hang. You don't really have a good move. If the rook moves, then something like queen e1 check, followed by capturing the bishop. Also bishop to d6 is coming. There's no playing this. If f3 attacking the queen, just queen d3 again, with all the same ideas. For example, if bishop to f4, there's even knight to d4. Even that is in the position, just attacking the rook. Also threatening knight to e2 with a nice royal fork here. And after rook to e1, defending against this, just knight e2 check, and that's it. You have to give up your only remaining source of counterplay, and then black is just up a piece and completely winning. So after this, queen captures on e4, Wesley resigned, and Magnus wins the first match. Really a nice one. It seems that Magnus had quite a better day than he did yesterday, but Wesley did give him quite a few opportunities. But it's it always happens when you don't go for the Evans Gambit. You should always go for it, otherwise you're going to lose like this. We're gonna check out some of the other games from the main event, Anish Giri versus Yanni Pomnishi, but there weren't really any decisive results in that match. So I'm gonna show one game from that matchup tomorrow, as one of them was kind of a feisty one. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Andrew Sabach, Norm Tremblay, William Gould, Shivan Mahajan, and Adriatic Tsifiku for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Magnus Carlsen Invitational, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And only now I've realized that my board, for some reason, is not properly centered. Happens sometimes when, I guess, chess.com updates the interface or something like that. So I will align it. The video is actually over, but if any of you want to check out how I align it, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, this is how we do it. There we go. All right, that should be perfectly aligned. All right, so thank you all, and I will see you soon.